one.
Hello, scholars and alumni, and welcome back to our summer career series. Thank you so much for joining us again. My name is Nicole Wesley, Senior Program Manager of Career Supports at TheDream.Us. I want to remind everyone that today's session is on Independent Contracting Part 2, where our returning guest speaker, Chris, will talk about project scoping, proposing, and how to price your services. For our last session, which will be tomorrow, our guest speaker will be a recent TheDream.Us alumni, Briseda, who will be discussing tips for landing paid micro internships on Parker Dewey. For those of you that don't know, Parker Dewey is a platform that lists short-term paid micro internships and projects that are structured as independent contracting gigs. Scholars are eligible to apply for these opportunities so long as you have a social security number or an ITIN. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items. Chris, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. First, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. State your name, the college you're attending, your major, and your LinkedIn URL. I know we've mentioned this in the past, but this is a great and simple way to network and connect with scholars and alumni across the country. As you're introducing yourself, I also want to remind everyone to please keep your mics muted throughout the duration of our presentation. There will be a Q&A at the end, so should you have any questions related to today's topic, please type them in the Q&A feature, not the chat. The Q&A feature will allow us to more easily read through and run through your questions. And lastly, copies of this slide deck and today's recording will be posted on our YouTube channel within a week's time. Next slide.
It's coming.
All right, thanks, Chris. So why a summer career series? We want to help inform you of your career options and what's possible as an undocumented student. Anyone, regardless of immigration status, can be an entrepreneur and pursue entrepreneurial careers, including independent contracting and freelancing, which Chris will be talking about again today, starting a business, and joining a worker cooperative. There's over 800,000 undocumented entrepreneurs in the US who are earning an income, providing for themselves and their families, and having a meaningful career. For more information on entrepreneurship, you can visit our career success page, and I'll put that link in the chat in a minute here. Next slide. For all entrepreneurial career paths, a social security number or ITIN is needed. ITINs are a powerful tool for those who are not eligible for a social security number. An ITIN is issued by the IRS for individuals to file and pay taxes. Beyond using an ITIN to file and pay taxes, an ITIN can also be used for things like opening a bank account, applying for an EIN, participating in inclusive internship and fellowships that are open to ITIN holders, and pursuing entrepreneurial careers. Please note, an ITIN does not provide legal status, nor does it provide work authorization. And for more information on ITINs, we have some great resources on our ITIN webpage. Also, I want to briefly mention that Chris mentioned yesterday about taxes. So I wanted to point out that we have a fairly new Tax Matters FAQ resource, which you can also find on our ITIN website. Next slide. And as a reminder, after today, we have our final session tomorrow, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern, where the topic will be tips on creating and on securing opportunities through Parker Dewey. That will be starting at 5 p.m. Eastern. Also, please know that all information shared today is for educational purposes only and should not be considered legal, business, or tax advice. Now that I've run through all the slides, I will go ahead and introduce our guest speaker, Chris Mercado, who is the founder and CEO of Grant Answers, a data, strategy, and product consulting firm. Grant Answers has helped technology, nonprofit, and workforce development ventures secure programs nationwide, growing over 6 times in revenue and securing $5 million in grants. Chris has directly served over 2,200 diverse talent to prepare them for tech and design careers and secure scholarships and admissions to top colleges and universities nationwide. Trusted by the likes of the Wall Street Journal, NBC, Teach for America, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for features, keynotes, and panels. Chris covers immigration, workforce development, education, entrepreneurship, and tech diversity and inclusion. With that, welcome Chris back, and please take it from here.
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you to all of the TheDream.Us staff, and for the audience, thanks for coming back for part 2. If you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, an easy search, or you can take your phone to the QR code, and we can connect there. You can also do the same for IG, and we can address any questions that you're not able to ask currently. So I want to start with a review from part 1, and we went over a lot of forms, 4 in total, right? So I just want to make sure that we orient ourselves to these essential forms so that we get them out of the way and we can focus on our business initiatives, starting a business, operating as an independent contractor or as a freelancer. So first, that W-7 form was to help you get your ITIN number, right? Or if you have already formed a business, you can get your EIN, your employer identification number, using an SS4 form, right? So once you get either number, then we have to focus on the 2 other forms that most likely we're going to be exposed to. So it's a W-9, right? And you're able to put in your ITIN or your EIN. And then the 1099 MISC form when you're making over like 600 or more. And the client would have a copy, you'd have a copy, so that everything is aligned once you file taxes. Okay? So we tried to simplify this to just 4 forms. Now, I also want to go back to part 1's business content. So in the chat, I'm going to check the chat. Can someone type in the chat what value proposition is, right? So hopefully, if you were here yesterday, something would stick regarding value proposition. I'll give you all a few seconds to type that in, right? But if you remember from the business model canvas portion of yesterday's presentation, value proposition simply means what value add are you going to have to a potential customer or a client, right? So how are you solving a problem that they have, or how are you addressing one of their needs, right? That's what value proposition is. And then the second part of that was customer segment, right? So as a quick exercise, I want you all to describe what the customer or client segment of the TheDream.Us is. So when you think about the TheDream.Us community, who they serve, what's their like demographic info? What's the category? What's the characteristics of the group that the TheDream.Us serves, right? So type that in the chat, right? Try to get as detailed as you can. I'll give you all 10 seconds, especially because a lot of you in the audience, you're part of the community, right? So when you think about the mission of the TheDream.Us and who it serves, you can describe the customer or client segment of the org as the immigrant students, right? So you can say immigrant college students. You might have an age range in there, so it could be 18 to 30, right? As the demographic. So as you get more granular, have more details on who your customers are, you can better match to the value proposition. Which leads me to number 3. Type in the chat if you remember what PMF is, what it stands for, right? If you know what it stands for, you could type that in the chat. If you want to take it to the next level, what does it really mean, right? So I'll give you all another 10 seconds to type that in the chat. All right. So if you remember again from the business model canvas discussion from yesterday, PMF is product market fit, right? So this means, does the value I offer, like does, the talent, the skills, the product I have, or the services I provide, does it really address the need of a particular customer segment? Like your services could be really valuable, but if it's not matched to the particular customer that can help sustain your freelancing or independent contracting, then it's not going to work out. And a lot of research has been done on this. So the reason why PMF, product market fit, is an important concept is because a lot of ventures fail simply because they did not reach that product market fit. So if the sooner you get to it, or the sooner you find out that you don't have that fit, the better off you are, because then you can pivot and adjust, and you also don't utilize so many resources, spend so much money, invest so much money on something that was misaligned in the first place. Okay, so PMF. And then the last review question is in the chat. Type in 2 ways to source freelancing clients. If you remember from yesterday's slides, I gave you a list of 4, right? 4 general ways. If you don't remember the descriptors of those ways, you can pick out particular tools and products that were referenced, right? So I'll give you all another 5 to 10 seconds if you remember that, or use your creativity. How would you source freelancing clients? All right, so type that in the chat. I see a couple folks in here that remember some of the key points from yesterday's presentation, and we're going to build off of that in the forthcoming slides, right? So if you're going to source freelancing clients, you could do it through referrals. So if you have an initial client, you can prompt them or ask them to spread word about how awesome you are, and then bring in different new clients. You can also use platforms that help you find clients. So we had Fiverr, TaskRabbit, and Upwork as a couple of platforms that were highlighted in the slide deck. Okay. If you have any questions on these, please put them in the Q&A queue, and we can address that a little bit later. Speaking of Q&A, before I go to today's slides, I want to address a question that was posed yesterday, right? And it actually serves as a good review, right? So we were asked, like, what forms do you have to fill out if you're trying to get paid by like an online platform? I think I inferred, if you're a content creator, if you're an influencer, you can get paid on platforms like Facebook and YouTube. So I dug up some details to help you all out, right? So this is YouTube. You have to get into Google AdSense is like the platform for you to get paid, right? And then they have guidance on the tax requirements, right? So you have these details like available for you. It actually came up in a simple Google search, right? But they'll take you through like the types of forms that you'd have to provide. But it is totally aligned with what we've discussed as far as the tax forms that we have, the numbers that you have to have, right? So if you notice here, they'll mention year-end tax forms, a 1099 MISC, which is what we mentioned before, right? And W-9s, which is what we referenced before as well. Okay. And then as a quick contrast, well, these are some of the other forms for Google and YouTube.
That doesn't mean.
But for Meta and Facebook, which also owns Instagram, they'll talk about an employer identification number if you represent a business, right? If it's a sole proprietorship, they mention your SSN. If you don't have one, other tax identification. That's where the ITIN comes in. Okay, so even when you dig through, there's alignment in what we've presented, all the content that you've gotten beforehand from the Dream.Us. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question, and it all opens up some possibilities for you all. You know, we'd love to see some of you all as content creators and influencers, if that, you know, is a pathway that you want to go to. Now we're gonna get to project proposals and scope of work. We're gonna get into the nuts and bolts of how we initiate these relationships with clients and how we progress towards delivering the services or like the product that will address their needs and solve their problems. Okay. So I think my quote yesterday is like, you become an independent contractor when someone contracts you, right? So those initial phases might involve some conversations with a potential client. It could also be something that you see in a job description, right? Those details. And before a project gets started, you can draft a proposal, right? And then as you're getting towards like initiating it, you can get towards another document, a more advanced document, which should be a scope of work. And what this does is both parties would clearly see what are the conditions that need to take place for both parties to continue working on this particular project, and the kind of payments that would be from one party to another. All of that would be laid out. Okay. So an overview of a project proposal, right? You might have one section, just 2 sentences long, 2 to 3 sentences long, executive summary, right? So it's a big general overview of what the project entails. And then underneath that, you can have the background of the project. Maybe it stems from another project that was just completed, or maybe it comes from new funding from a philanthropic organization that wants to kind of see how a program might be able to run within an organization, right? So those details can be in this project background, but again, these are just like 2 to 3 sentences to give people a high level overview, right? All the stakeholders a high level overview. And then you can get a little bit more detailed with your solutions and approaches. And I think the important thing to note here is that when you're proposing, so this is before you initiate a project, some of this might be guesswork. Some of this might be based on previous similar work. Some of this might be based on the training that you've gotten or the research that you've done on your client. And you can adjust this this section based on any or all of those factors. Okay. In the proposal, you can also project like financials, like how much money is this going to take for the entire project to be executed. Again, this is a little bit of guesswork, but if you have, again, previous experience, or you can simply ask the client, what's your budget, right? And then maybe work towards the max of that budget in drafting a proposal, right? And you can draft this proposal for yourself on your own first. You could do it collaboratively with the client at the same time. So there's no like, set rules for that. But if you want fuller control of like the vision of it, and if you want to take that first step, you can go ahead and propose. Additional documents. So it could be any relevant research reports. It could be letters of support for a project. It could be an appendix that has like a glossary of terms that might be helpful as well, right? And then in this proposal, people get bogged down with all the details. So at the end, give a synopsis, give a quick summary at the end of the main points within the proposal. All right?
This is where
Cool.
if these things are being recorded.
So we're gonna take this to a different level. And let's say we drafted a proposal, it was approved. The client liked what they saw. Now it's time to get to the nitty-gritty and to actually scope out the project. Make sure that there are mutually agreed conditions, right? So purpose, the work to be performed, which also implies there's work that won't be performed. And you could explicitly state that in the scope of work, right? This is what will be done and this is what won't be done. There's also process for like changing like money, like how much the transaction will be, for changing orders. You can stipulate how that happens, right? And then you can outline the roles and responsibilities for you, but also the client. There are milestones and timelines for the work to be executed. So typically like one big project isn't one step, right? It's done in incremental steps for folks to iterate or to just break down a big piece of work. So it's a little bit simpler to get through each subtask, right? And then in that scope, you can't just be out here, it's like, oh, I did the project, people felt good, right? Right? And like, I guess I did well. No, it has to be set forth, like what are the key performance indicators? So if you've never seen the acronym KPI, that's key performance indicator, right? And the idea is like, how do you measure performance? So let's say we were trying to measure performance of this presentation. A survey can be sent out to audience members and maybe they would rate the presentations, right? Or if I've helped, let's say one of you helps build an online platform to help immigrants, form their businesses, right? Then we would want to know how many people visit that platform or how many people go through the trainings on that platform. Those would be key performance indicators, and that could be laid out in the project scope, right? And then what I would argue is the most important part. Let's talk money, right? It's not just the entire amount. When am I getting my money, right? Are there any bonuses or incentives? Like if I complete a project a month in advance, is there a bonus related to that? Could be, right? Or there could be certain conditions. Like if you deliver phase 1 of a project, then that triggers a 33% payment of like the total budgeted amount. All right. You get to, again, if you had a lot of control, you get to set those terms. Of course, the client has to ultimately agree or compromise with you, right? But you can lay out all of these aspects, right? And to make things easier, here's the scope of work. In fact, I'm gonna put this in the chat. So in the chat, I'm gonna type in scope of work, right? And I've made it clear to make a copy. So you can't work off of this copy. So you hit file, right? Assuming you'll get on Google Docs, find, make a copy, and it's yours. And I'll walk you through it. So you can have letterhead up top, right? Put in the project name, all those contact details. Project background is here, deliverables, right? So this could be from initial planning to a retrospective to go over all the things that went on during a project. Okay. I put here a clause that clearly states if there's any work that's asked of me after June 30th, 2024, after the retrospective is completed, that's going to require a new scope of work because that's additional work, right? So this is setting your boundaries. This is acknowledging that your labor is valuable, right? And it makes it clear to the client. Now, I know sometimes it might be difficult or there's like to communicate something that feels like really assertive. And one of the reasons why I deliver content oftentimes in a very like assertive way is because I want you all to get used to this type of interactions, right? You're going to get clients who are like wide ranging from very assertive, very insistent to like very fickle. Like they'll ask you to do one thing and then the next meeting they'll ask for something else. So the challenge with that is like that's gonna cause a little bit of chaos for you. So if you have everything laid out in a very transparent and clear, concise way, it makes this a lot smoother. Okay, all expectations are put down on paper. It removes a lot of guesswork. All right, does that make sense? Cool. The quote and payment schedule, it's down here. All right, so this is the simplest form of scope of work. I fielded a question on Instagram related to like contracts and a scope of work. Sometimes you'll see as an attachment at the end of a contract. The reason I can't give you a contract is because one, that's it's not advised by lawyers to like my contract are confidential, so I can't exactly share those details with you. But generally you might want to get some legal assistance to have a legal professional do a look through of a standard contract template for you. And what changes, right? So the main contract doesn't change, but what changes is the scope of work. Okay, so that's one of the most efficient ways to set it to set up that way, right? Okay, so we've taken care of that. I gave you the template, right? And then I took it another level, right? So if you have the scope of work, then you have the details that would lead to what you might need in an invoice. So you're gonna get ready for another link, right? Invoice template is what I'm gonna put in the chat. And again, you do file, make a copy. You can personalize this with your letterhead. Okay. And in the description, you just add the details from the scope of work, or you take the summary from the project proposal, right? Any of those details. And you put it in the description, what's the amount, right? It's, let's say it was just one presentation, one project, cost per unit is 3,000, so the total amount is one unit, which is 3,000, okay? You let people know like how you want to get paid, so paying by check, make the check payable to, could be the company, could be to you, right? Any questions, some contact info. There's a Venmo, PayPal, or like situation, you can set that up to on the invoice. Okay. Right. So again, hopefully this doesn't feel too complex, right? Cool. Now, since we're talking a little bit about money, let's get to pricing. It's the hardest thing. Well, one of the hardest things, but it doesn't have to be, right? So
We do that.
one way to find your price range is if you think about the platforms that we talked about yesterday, like it could be a Fiverr. Why don't you search for freelancers on that site, um, as if you were looking to hire them and see what they charge, right? And they'll have like a bio, they'll have a description of like if do you have a similar skill set or like similar amount of experience. If you have those details, you can maybe gauge where you fit on a range of how you should be paid if you did the similar work, right? You can do this regionally. So you could know by word of mouth how much people who do similar work or will build similar like products as you, how much they get paid for the work that they do, right? Once you have this data from a little bit of research, you can create your range and for me, I don't like giving ranges. I learned from a very prominent business leader that, when we give a range, our minds tend to go to the midpoint anyway. So we tend to gravitate towards the middle number. So instead of a range, why don't you just pick a number and you let people know this is how much this product or building this product or this service would cost, right? And don't flinch once you say the price. That's the price. You can have fixed pricing. You can have hourly pricing, right? So there are people out there who do some freelancing and like they'll propose a project and what some of them do is like, all right, I think I can do this work in 8 hours, right? So you can uh project that, right? But maybe you'll quote them on a proposal as like, I think this project will take me 12 hours, right? And any of the difference, right? There's partly an honor code. Um, there's there are ways to actually track people's working time, even on a freelancing basis. But you can just set it on an hourly schedule, or you could do the entire like project. So if I know that my contributions to deploying a website, for example, right? It could be web design, it could be just copywriting, so like coming up with the text for a website, or it could be the actual like coding of a website. Whatever that is, you say, all right, my rate is 5K. That's it. It's up to the client to decide whether or not for them that number works, right? So the big point here is you set the tone on the pricing if you can, or if you don't want to give the number first because you're not confident in like the research that you've done, just ask for the budget. Like, what's your budget, right? And you can play off of that budget as like, all right, I'm going to meet that budget. You can counter with something like, oh, I had envisioned something that was like a little bit higher, 10% higher, 20% higher, right? See if they would budge on their initial amount. But I just want you to feel empowered to talk about money and pricing in a way that's a little bit more comfortable, that's in an assertive way, because if you start to waver, you might be costing yourself some business down the line, and you'll see this in an upcoming slide. Right? So if you price too low, right? What do some of your loved ones, like adults, parents, guardians, whatever, when they see something that's like really cheap, what might they say? What comments do they have? I have one cliche that comes to mind when people see a price and they're like, wait, really? That's the price? It's that low? What do people sometimes think? You type it in the chat, right? Any phrases or sayings come to mind? Because there you go. That's the one. It could be what's the catch? It could be too good to be true, two great ones, right? So when you price low, right, sometimes you instill doubt in people, like, why is it so low? It must not be that great, right? But then on the other end, if you price too high, well, then some people just can't afford it. So maybe clients that you had intended are now turned off because like they, they they can't get your services, they can't get your product because they simply can't afford it, right? And again, this goes to the business model canvas and this idea of like, who are your customers? The price isn't I could I could sell something for $1 million, right? And it would be easy if my customer base were high net worth people, right? But if you're trying to sell like $1 million product to folks who aren't high net worth, then like they're not gonna be able to purchase from you. You're not gonna make any money. So that's why pricing and value proposition and the customer segments, like knowing these things really are important. Okay. As you get the hang of this, right? You build your reputation, you gain experience, right? Then increase your prices, right? So when I first opened up to speaking engagements, I'd be happy with like $500. Nowadays, right? Because I've had a couple of high profile engagements, $500 is something that I'd say yes to more as like a favor to whoever I want to impact, right? But that wouldn't be like a standard price. It would be like 4 figures at the very least, right? So you do a good job, you let well, hopefully others will let others know that you've done a good job. Your reputation builds, right? That's why it's important to not just collect content about your excellence, your execution of whatever product or service, but you need to share that and let people know. That's part of like marketing. Okay. So I see a private comment. So just keep that in mind, right? It's gonna go up. You don't have to like, just because inflation is going up, that shouldn't be the sole reason why you should be raising prices, because you're getting better at it. You're delivering better quality and better satisfaction to your clients. Okay. Now you have to do a little bit of math, and I have a little surprise for you a little bit later to help you with math. So you let's say you get a two hour job and the fixed price is like 60, right? We can't just look at, oh, I'm gonna get $60, right? That's a win. No, we have to we have to find out what our profits are gonna be. So you know what your earnings are gonna be, right? But then you have expenses, right? It could be like a laptop that you need to do the job, right? Uh, you're gonna have to budget a little bit for taxes you have to pay later. So you might see a $60 fixed price for the project, but when you factor in any expenses to do the work, plus the taxes, maybe that ends up being like a $15 effective hourly rate. And then you're better able to ask, is this worth my time? Right? Is doing this worth my time? Right? Speaking of time, you have 5 minutes until we get to Q&A, so keep those questions coming, right? And then, you can do a lot of research on pricing, right? So I gave some content here from Upwork. I also went on ZipRecruiter and I typed in translator contract for New York City, where I am. And look, $30 an hour, right? It's a little bit higher than nationwide. So maybe on a basic level, if someone asks you to translate, oh, 30 an hour, that's the starting point for how much you can charge. Okay. And that was a simple getting on a platform. It could be, there's various platforms you can do that. You just type in the contract role. Okay. We took care of invoicing, right? So we gave you a template, but you can use software like QuickBooks um, to make it a little bit more seamless. Okay. Just a quick reminder, itemize the work so that all parties know what exactly cost what. Okay. So you have an example here on this slide. It also helps if you are very detail oriented and have an invoice number. Again, like my invoice number is up to like 300 now, right? But I started at 001, right? The first contract. Okay. And then just know that there are tons of resources out there for you, right? So I bring up the Spark platform, or Immigrants Rising, because one, I was contracted to uh work on the platform. So a lot of what I've shared with you over the past few days, like it brings me back to me working on this platform, how I had to look through scopes of work and what pricing for me would be like. And also some of the content that I've shared with you is actually in this resource. So that's one thing to take a look at. Let me get, well, sorry. There's a resource when it comes to LLC formation, right? So from the Small Business Administration, there's a lookup where you can register in case you want to formalize your business to an LLC. And whatever state you are, you look it up, you hit submit, and it will point you to where you can create your LLC. Okay. The surprise I have for you is bookkeeping. So I wanted to make this easier for you, and I'm going to put this in the link. And I'm going to give a shout out to someone in the audience who is my intern for the summer. So I'm going to do bookkeeping in the chat, right? And I'm going to share out this link. I'll show you what this looks like. So it's a dual ledger bookkeeping, right? And there's an instruction tab here where it says help, right? But here's how this works. So you want to track your sales and then like expenses really quickly. So let's say TheDream.Us paid me $2 million, hint, hint, for this presentation, right? So that's 2,000 in sales. So that's 2 million in sales, and that's 2 million in cash, right? So this has to be even, right? Because I made this sale, I have this much in cash because of that sale. And then it asks if it's in balance. The formula is already provided for you. So you don't have to mess with the formulas, you just put in the numbers. And then let's say I contract my former intern, Rosa, and I paid her $1 million. So this goes under contract labor, right? because she filled out her ITIN or EIN. And I was like, I wanna hire her again. And then I paid her $1 million, right? So you saw $1 million contract labor, but that's not money being added to me. That's money being taken away because I'm paying her. So in finance, negatives are in like parentheses. So I'm going to type in 1 million around parentheses, right? And then what you should see is the oops turns to okay, so you're balanced. And then if you look at the report, right, you have a net income statement that's automatically generated. So you can take this to whoever's preparing your taxes and you'll have bookkeeping done. So what this looks like is 2 million in sales, right? Labor cost me $1 million. So my net income is $1 million. Okay. Yeah, this will come in Monopoly money, Rosa. So I wanted to, again, take it up a notch again to make things easy, right? So we're gonna get to, just give me 1 more minute. We'll get to Q&A. So if you want other fancier invoices, there's a site called invoicesimple.com and you can get other templates there, right? Other resources that I found really helpful. I've gotten pro bono legal help to independent contracting and look over contracts with clients. And the Volunteers of Legal Service has been one that's been helpful. And another org has been Start Small, Think Big. And I've gotten free like workshops on finance and accounting or like the business model canvas to help me in my journey. Okay. I'm gonna end there, right? So I hope you found that helpful. As we go to Q&A, I'm gonna check what I see in the Q&A. I'll say this one big point. We have lowered the barriers for you with this content. You've come across some amazing people in the Dream.Us community that hopefully serve as inspirations to you, right? So maybe that can serve as a motivator. I want you all to remember how talented and all that potential that you have, right? And you're gonna learn new skills and how valuable that is. So in trying to add some content to demystify things, lower barriers, and motivate you, in short, you're out of excuses, right? There's nothing left that we can do. And we are encouraging you to take the next step so that you secure those contracts or you form these businesses. Okay. I'll get to the Q&A. I can read it off, Nicole, if you don't mind. So Carlos, you asked, I plan on becoming an independent contractor where I'm currently working at because I cannot become full-time. How do I deal with not having benefits such as insurance? Great question. Should I take that into consideration when negotiating payment? Carlos, and for everyone in this situation, which includes me, it needs to be figured in, right? And that is simply, it's not about negotiation. It's actually about advocating for yourself, right? Because if you look at it from the company's perspective, they're saving money by not having to give you benefits, right? But if they're kind of treating you just like their employee, then there has to be some trade-off because again, the legal distinctions of employee versus independent contracting, they're very clear. So either they make up for it as like extra compensation, or one way to look at this too is like, well, I should have more free time, right? Because if you're going to equate time to money, then the lack of benefits, which equates to money, if they're not going to figure that into compensation, then you should have more time or less hours, right? But the same amount of pay. Does that make sense, Carlos? You could type it in the chat, right? But yes, it is simply part of advocating for yourself. I'm in that process too. So my contracts for grant answers, right? It ranges from $8,000 a month, right? Which could be on an ongoing basis or like a year-to-year contract. So every month I send the same invoice and I get paid the same amount. Some are like one-time contracts. For the longer form ones, uh longer the longer duration work, that's where I'll interject like, hey, um with regards to not receiving benefits, uh I'll propose a certain budget amount that already includes uh not being paid for benefits, right? So I sometimes don't explicitly say it. Sometimes it's figured into the amount that I'll say works best for me. But if they want further explanation, then you can cite that. So I'm gonna mark that as done. Um, I'm gonna take Jordy's question. If we started our LLC in May, when should we meet with a specialized person for taxes? What are the beginning steps for this process? Well, I think we started you off with the beginning steps, which is the net income statement and like the automated um bookkeeping tool that we shared in the chat, right? So that way you're not giving like a bookkeeper or an accountant a bunch of receipts. You've already done that yourself, or you had a team member do that. You still should explain like those figures. By the way, you might have to adjust some of the categories based on um the nature of your business, right? So if you're tech heavy, then one of those categories um, related to expenses has to be like technology equipment, right? Um, but as you start securing these contracts, right, and then you're going to be asked to fill out like W-9s and 1099 MISCs. What's really crucial is that you have that paperwork organized, right? You're going to need copies of that 1099 MISC ready for when you go to your tax preparer, right? Um, and then you're going to need some sort of like financial record keeping, like this net income statement, um, so that you can, so that the tax preparer can do this a lot more seamlessly, Jordy, right? And that goes for everyone. So the beginning steps, I would argue, is what are the systems that you're going to create so that when you get a W-9, right? Where am I going to keep a copy of this? When I get a 1099 MISC, where do I keep a copy of this, right? When I make any transaction, where do I record that transaction, right? So that could be from the template that I gave you all. And also, where do I store the invoice? Do I keep them all in the same like Google shared folder? Or do I not put them in the cloud? And like, do I have them in? I mean, technically you could have everything in physical paper. But take it from me, that gets a little messy, right? If you can digitize things, that's great. But they should all be in one place so that if uh someone needs to reference it, can easily pull it up. I'm gonna type that as done, Jordy, right? Um, I'll check a couple of other things in the chat. Thanks for sharing my LinkedIn. So Leo, sociology major from Colorado. Thanks for coming in. You'll get copies of the slide deck, right? Yeah, like keep questions coming. Oh, Jordy, you had one in the chat, so I can go ahead and take this with the extra time. How do you maintain an effective schedule where you don't get overloaded one week with work and underloaded with work another week as a contractor? Right. So this is part of the pros and cons of freelancing, right? So you do have the flexibility. So technically you could space out, let's say I only work with 2 clients at a time, and that's my focus. But then what if you do a short-term job and you do really well, and then they ask for more, or they refer you to other people, and then they're like, hey, we really like your work. Can we contract you to do something? But then you had this other client again, like you kept 2 at one time. So now you're gonna get requests to do like 3, 4 within a time frame where you initially thought I can only handle 2, right? So if you delay, you're like, hey, I can't do this now. Can we have a start date? Well, maybe that might not meet the new client's timelines. So you might lose that client, right? Um, I am someone who I've taught this in other forms. There's balance is like a myth most of the time. And what this simply is trade-offs. Something has to suffer, right? Because there's a finite amount of energy that you have and finite amount of days, right? Suffering doesn't mean it's like super painful, but something won't get done. So is it during that span where you're taking on like 4 to 5 clients, you spend less time with friends, right? So your time with friends suffers a little bit. Or let's say you're in school currently and you take on some freelancing clients because you're like a freelance graphic designer. Well, you won't have as much time to devote to study. And this brings up a really great point, which is I am not here to judge you on your decisions being right or wrong. What I tell everyone, whether it's formal classes where I teach regularly or workshops and seminars like this, is it's not about right or wrong. It's about risk and reward, right? And this goes to the concept of trade-offs. So I want you to get better at calculating the risks and rewards of actions that you take. In this case, in taking on clients, right? Maybe it is worth sacrificing uh, studying for an exam if you get approached by a celebrity client. Because if you do a good job with this celebrity client, then you get pulled into a network of other celebrities, right? And for a long-term view, that's going to be more valuable than trying to get an A in intro to psychology. It's risk and reward. It's up to you to decide. So I'm never going to say it's like right or wrong. It's about risk and reward. Any other questions? I'll look up one time and then I'm going to say this last point. I wasn't kidding. I was kidding about $1 million, but I wasn't kidding about rehiring one of the Dream.Us scholars. I had told her explicitly that I want to bring her back at some point, right? And I was nudging her to try to do this as a business because, that was some plans that she had talked about before. And I'm more than happy to take in some proposals from any of you all, right? Where maybe you contribute to the work that I do for others. I don't mind paying folks, but I'm offering that as a way to motivate you all. Just as please take this next step, right? The uncertainty is easily solved by simply taking this next step. And my close to this is simply today, like actual day, marks another business anniversary for me. This exact day. It's in the New York State filings for for grant answers, right? And I know full well how intimidating the process can be. And I want you to know that you're not alone in feeling this way. But what's most important is that I want you to know that you have everything within you to figure things out, right? So please consider taking that next step. And with that, I'll pass it along to you, Nicole.
Well, as always, thank you so much, Chris, for your expertise and time, and sharing your advice and resources with our scholars and alumni. And also thanks to Rosa for also creating that bookkeeping template as well. As a reminder, this recording, as well as a copy of the slide decks, will be posted on our YouTube channel within a week's time. So please check that out. Our last session for the Summer Career Series is tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. Tips for landing a paid micro internship on Parker Dewey. All opportunities on Parker Dewey are structured as independent contracting gigs. We've had scholars be very successful in securing multiple Parker Dewey micro internships. So check it out tomorrow if you're interested. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see a good chunk of you tomorrow. Thanks so much. Take care.